Have you ever wondered what talent is, what makes a talented junior or adult player, any athlete, but particularly a tennis player? What makes a champion? What are the ingredients that can be designed and built into a world class player? Well, this is the show for you, Prodigy Maker Tennis Show, episode 98. It's Chris Lewit back with you, top American junior coach and coach to many number one juniors in the US. And it's good to be talking to you guys. We're going to talk about talent. What makes a talented player? Everybody talks about that word. It's a charged word, it has a lot of polarity. But talent, for me, I'd like to go into what I see as talent and relate it maybe to some players that I've worked with both recently and in my experience. So I've been fortunate to work with many prodigies myself. And even when I was a young coach and I was just getting started, I worked with my coach, Gilad Bloom, the legendary Israeli coach and Davis Cup player, professional player. And he had a lot of prodigies that he worked with. So from the very beginning, when I got injured and couldn't play anymore on the pro circuit, I was around prodigies. I was around really talented young players. And so I think I've always been fascinated by what makes an elite junior and what are the gifts that a player has to become great at this game. And I want to talk about the different levels because a lot of people say, "Oh, that kid has talent," or "My son or daughter has talent." A lot of parents tell me that. Pretty much, most parents I talk to, they say, "Well, my daughter is very talented," and sometimes they're right, and sometimes I don't quite agree. And then usually it gets down to like, what is the definition of talent? Notoriously difficult to define, and sports scientists have expressed that you should be very cautious about trying to gauge talent, especially pre-puberty. So I think some of the research doesn't support talent ID. It's notoriously difficult, and sports scientists talk about this in research, that it's very hard to have an accurate talent identification program or to accurately identify talent. But I'm going to tell you, not so much based on my scientific perspective, but just as a coach working with lots of young, talented, quote unquote, players. And I'd like to go over some of the categories that I think are important. So, one of the things you look for with talent is speed, how quick a player is. Uh, Very important. There's different levels of speed, but you want to have off the chart speed to have a chance to be a pro, certainly to have a chance to be a top Division 1 player. I'd like to talk about those two goals too, because I think at the pro level, you need a different level of talent than just to be a good college player. And to be a Grand Slam champion, you probably have to have even more special talents. But speed is one of them. Power is another. So that, from a sports science point of view, is a lot of fast twitch fibers, the ability to generate a lot of muscular force from the contractions in the muscular system. That is, I think, those two are. If I have a short list of talent, remember it's a broad list, but if I had to have a two at the top of the list, you're looking for a kid who moves exceptionally well, is extremely fast, like world class sprinter fast, like Olympic level speed in terms of starting and stopping, so accelerating and decelerating, changing direction, agility, basically the ABCs: agility, balance, coordination, and speed. So if you look at the ABCs of a young kid, you're looking for something that's off the charts. Let's say to be an elite pro down the road. And then power, you're looking for a kid who can really generate pace and create a lot of force. Not the scientific use of force, just the layman's term, force, power. Can hit the ball really hard, and that those two things will carry a player very far. But there's another many other categories of talent that I'd like to get into. It comes to my mind recently because I worked with this young girl, Vlada Hranchar from Ukraine, and she was here. She came here during the Ukrainian war. She escaped through Poland, and I picked her up at the bus stop in Albany, and she stayed here almost 2 years. And I trained her a good amount of that time. Many times we trained every day, and she, in my view, was probably the most talented kid that I've seen in the last 10 or 15, 20 years that I've been coaching. I've coached a lot of really good kids. And Vlada most recently moved to Florida, and she's under contract with Rick Macci. They signed a 20-year contract, and Rick Macci has predicted that she's going to be the next number one player in the world. So I think this is a very interesting story because when Vlada was here, I felt that she had a lot of quote unquote talent. I felt she was really, really special. And that perspective seems to have been validated by Rick, who has worked with a lot of elite juniors and developed a lot of top pros. He has very good insight into what is talent. And he felt also that Vlada had this tremendous talent. And so I just thought that was interesting. And the categories that I'm thinking of are all categories that Vlada really excelled at. She's very quick, has great agility, balance, coordination, speed, very powerful for her size. And then we can go down the list of other assets that you're looking for, quote unquote, talents or abilities or gifts. And it's just on my mind because she's just back visiting Vermont. She's visiting Manchester, Vermont, and she's been training with me, playing with me here, and working out at the club. And I'm just reminded of how gifted she really is, and all of the talents, quote unquote, that she has. And she's I hope that she makes it. I really truly hope that she becomes a good pro. Rick says she's going to be number one. I mean, that's a very bold prediction. So many things can happen down the road, especially injuries. I know Rick knows that too, but certainly I thought she could be a world class player, and I really hope that she does get to that very high level because she's a really nice kid, and I'm close with her family, with her mom and dad. So now she's down in Florida, and Rick is guiding her, and he's been doing an excellent job because she's improved at 9 years old. She's one of the best 9-year-olds in the world right now. She was here with me in Vermont when she was 6 to 8, and now she's 9 and one of the best in the world. She has above 7 UTR. She's really a tremendous player. If you get a chance to look her up, her name is Vlada, Vlada Hranchar, Hranchar, and she's very popular on like Instagram and TikTok, and she's a really I I I will vouch for her talent. She is the real deal. For any of you who have seen her on Instagram, or you think maybe Rick is bluffing, or Rick is sort of just selling like a just like you don't believe the hype. But in this case with Vlada, the hype is real. She's the real deal. And I felt she was this talented when she first came here, when she had just turned 6 years old. She escaped from the Ukrainian war, and she was a refugee here training with me. And I saw the same talent that Rick sees in her now while she's training with him down in Florida. So in this case, I agree 100% with Rick that this is not hype. This kid is for real. And so I think you'll be hearing a lot more about Vlada. But Vlada had these attributes. She's very, very quick. I was hitting with her this week. She's extremely fast, and she hits the ball tremendously hard for her size. One thing that Vlada doesn't have is big size. And for me, size is one of those categories that I think is another area that I look for in terms of talent. Like, how tall, tall slash strong are you going to be? How long will your levers be? So this is something that actually is the one category that I don't think Vlada is going to have. She seems to me maybe average size. but we'll see. It's hard to predict. Like I said, pre-puberty, it's hard to predict how tall a player will be. But generally, for me, I like to see, a girl, 5'10" to over 6 feet, and for a boy, 6'1" to 6'5" or 6'6" even now. I like to see those really big freaks. You're looking for freak athletes. That's another thing that I say. If you're wondering what off the charts talent is, you're looking for freaks. So freakish speed, like Alcaraz speed, Olympic level sprinting speed. You're looking for freakish power, like power that the player just generates power, and you're like shocked by how much power, especially with a young kid, they can generate. Like when Vlada hits her backhand, it's like an unbelievable bullet that you wouldn't expect from such a young kid, but she has a tremendous fast twitch fibers in her body. She can do that, and I think that's typical of all prodigies and phenoms. They can hit the ball really hard for their age, and they have. I'd like to have the size component in there. Vlada does not have the size right now, but I would like to see tall as possible. It's possible to be too tall because sometimes if you're excessively tall, you may not have the coordination. Like you see some of the 7 foot tall players or 6'8" and above. Sometimes they don't have maybe as good a coordination or agility. Maybe it hurts their movement. But in general, taller is better, I think, because it just makes you more powerful and allows you to dominate with the serve. So for me, tallness is another thing that I look for. It's possible to be a world-class player if you're shorter. Like look at, Alcaraz is kind of an average size, for a tennis player, 6 foot, maybe 6'1". I don't even think he's 6'1", maybe 6 feet. So going through the other categories, I want to, try to get to a lot of them because I start off with, physical things, but some other interesting areas, the eyes. Nobody really talks about the eyes, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. I really think that the vision is the vision and reaction of a player. And one of the ways sometimes I informally measure that is just by, bringing a kid to the net and hitting some balls at fast pace, see if they can handle it, see if they track it and hit the ball cleanly. Do they make good contact or do they miss it a lot? The best, most elite phenoms that I've worked with, they have this tremendous, tremendous sports vision. They probably have, they're probably, 28 in vision, 2010. They can see at 20 what other people can see at 10, or they can see at 20 what other people can see at 8. And so I think this is an area that it's not easy to measure, but I can only measure it informally. Experts like Dr. Dan Labby, sports vision expert, I mean, he can actually measure it in the lab with computer tests and things like that. There's other aspects of sports vision too, but the whole category of sports vision, I think, is very important. So there's also there's dynamic visual acuity, there's depth perception, there's contrast sensitivity. This is getting a little bit into the sports science weeds, but essentially there's general visual acuity. But I think that the elite kids that I've worked with and the ones who are the best in the world, they have actually a better set of peepers, better set of eyes than other kids. And that's something I don't think a lot of people talk about because it's not something that you see immediately. You see the height of someone. You see how fast they move. Sometimes you can pick up on that. You can see how hard someone hits. You can kind of observe that. It's a little harder and more nuanced to see how good a kid's eyes are. Like a couple of examples, you can hit a ball way up into the sky, and when it bounces, do they whiff it? And when they try to hit it, or do they hit it clean? That's a simple test. Robert Lansdorp used to use that test of the eyes and coordination. Another one that I like is when a kid's at the net and I'll fire balls at them. I'll hit really hard, like pro level ground stroke at them, and see how they respond. Do they run out of the way? Do they reflexively volley it back? Do they get their racket on it? Do they hit the ball clean? With young kids, just rallying with them, even with kids who don't have good technique, the kids who have the sharpest vision, they almost never miss hit the ball. They hit the ball nice and clean. It's such a beautiful thing. And you can kind of get a sense that they have great eyes. But I think the eyes really matter uh, when kids get to a high level and the ball starts coming at a very high velocity, that's where you see the difference in the eyes. Sometimes that can be the difference between being a good college player and being a world-class pro. I think another area where I test kids on return of serve, I'll have a kid return serve and I'll hit hard serves at them, harder than they would receive for their age, and I see whether they're intimidated by that, whether they see the ball clearly and make good contact, good impact. Do they seem overwhelmed and whiff the ball? I've noticed with some lower level players, they may be talented in some areas, but they actually don't have great eyes, and they'll miss hit the ball or whiff the ball. They may be very strong or might even be quick, but they don't have good eyes. They don't have great coordination, hand-eye coordination. I mean, elite world-class hand-eye coordination. They don't have the greatest reaction, so that's how quickly the brain receives the input through the eyes and then sends the signal um, through the motor neurons to move the body. So that would be the reaction. All those aspects related to sports vision, I think, are super critical. And I was hitting with Vlada this week, and like I fired balls at her that almost took her head off a few times when she had the net, and she's quick like a ninja, and actually got a racket on it and tapped the ball back over the net. It's just incredible reaction for a 9-year-old, like unbelievable. Or I'll fire a 100-mile-per-hour serve at her, and she'll return it cleanly off the backhand side. Like uh, that's not typical for a 9-year-old. That shows incredible hand-eye coordination, very, very, very good vision. Sometimes what I like to do is when I'm hitting with a kid, I'll just fire a really fast ball at them from the baseline to baseline, and see how they react. Like, do they turn quickly, and are they like a sharpshooter eyeing the ball and they make a great connection, or do they like whiff the ball and they're like totally overwhelmed? And in my experience, the lesser athletes who are not quite as gifted, especially with the eyes, they'll whiff the ball, they'll miss hit a lot. Uh, Another test for that is you can ask kids to take the ball in their eyes, and most people have a really hard time taking the ball in their eyes. And I think the most elite kids, uh, they they can take the ball early off the half volley, short hops, which you really should probably avoid. In Spain, they always say avoid short hops. And the really gifted kids, they have a talent for that. And I think it comes down to their sports vision, their tremendous world-class sports vision. So there's all these little tests that I do. I don't think a lot of people look for that in terms of the eyes, but I think it's like a really big thing. Uh, another category for talent, I know probably parents, coaches, and maybe even players are interested in this, but is the ability not to get hurt and being resilient. Moratoglu just made a video about this. I thought he was really, really smart, really insightful. And he said, I think it was 3 things he said. One of them was, I think he said like movement and power was one of them. Is for sure. Like everybody knows that movement and power. How fast you move, how much power you can generate. Uh, and then he said something interesting. He said, I'm looking for athletes that don't get hurt easily and who are very resilient. He said, the best athletes don't get hurt very much because their bodies can like withstand the tennis. I think that's how he put it. Like their bodies can handle the training. And I thought that was a very, very good point. You don't hear many coaches talk about that. But for me, this might be one of the greatest talents that nobody talks about is actually resilience and physical, the capacity not to get um, hurt, the ability not to get hurt. And when really, really high level athletes do get hurt, they bounce back really quick. They very rarely sustain serious injuries. uh, I noticed that also with Vlada, just because she's here training this week, and it came to my mind that like she trains like an animal, like 4 hours a day plus like professional gym, and she like never gets hurt. So maybe that's just luck, and then that luck will run out. But I've also had other very elite kids who they just seem to be hardy, like their tendons, their muscular structure, their ligaments. It's like they're made from a different DNA, like literally, they're made from strong materials that don't break or don't break down. They can withstand a lot of the tennis, a lot of the training, and to be great in tennis, to be world class, one of the best in the world, you have to like train a lot. an interesting side point, like um, serving, for example, with some kids who are, I think, less talented athletes, they serve 40 or 50 balls, and their back hurts, the shoulder gets sore, and you have to stop or rest, or their wrist hurts or whatever. And with the really elite athletes, like you could serve like a couple hundred balls, 200 balls, and they're like, what? It was nothing. Like it didn't bother me at all. They're like physical. The way they're designed, the way they're built, their DNA is just a little bit different in terms of the way their body withstands forces, and if they do get hurt, how quickly their body repairs. That's another aspect of, I think, world-class athletes, is they to be high-level tennis player, your body has to repair quickly if you do sustain injuries. And we know on the tour, injuries are a huge issue, and you have some amazingly quote unquote talented players in maybe some of the categories I mentioned, but they're not talented in this category: injury prevention, hardiness, like sturdiness and resilience, and they end up flaming out of tennis. And there's many cases of that, both in juniors and at the professional level, of really really talented players who are not talented in the not getting injured category. So I think that one is like huge, that nobody, very rarely do I hear that being talked about. Moratoglu mentioned it, that they stay healthier. They tend to stay healthier. So that is really smart observation from Moratoglu. And then I agree with Moratoglu, and in his final point about what is the talent, like what is the gift. Um, he said it's the competitive drive, the fighting spirit, the how badly do they want it. And he also mentioned like the discipline and work ethic. So let's take those two categories. Very, very important categories. Definitely talents. How hard you work, you know. Again, since just talking about Vlada, since she's been here and she's on my mind, one of the hardest working kids I've ever seen. Never complained, never, never made excuses, always pushed herself every practice, high intensity, every practice, even at like 6 years old, which is crazy. Not only that, but also in the gym. How many young kids do I coach? They don't even want to work out. Vlada's hitting the gym like a professional. Um, so yeah, like I agree with Rick. Like Rick must have saw the same things that I saw. Like she's just dialing up like tens on all of the categories. And Rick made the prediction, like this kid's going to be the next number one. He gave her a 20-year contract, which is unheard of, and he's representing her as an agent and as her coach. And he hasn't done that since Serena and Venus. He said that he's never had this situation before, except with Venus and Serena, where he did the same type of contract with them, and he also predicted that they would be on top of the world. So, pretty interesting stuff there. But the work ethic, Moratoglu talks about that. How hard is this kid willing to work? You shouldn't have to beg a kid to work hard. They should bring it. And you can work on that as a coach, but sometimes if a kid just has that, it's really nice. It's really nice if a kid brings that to the table, the discipline. I remember a great story, like Vlada was like 7 or 8, and no, 7. Yeah, she is 7, and we're training really hard. And she says to me, Chris, she pulls me aside and says, Chris, I need to work a little harder. I need to push me a little more today. I was like how many 7-year-olds come up to you and say they need you as a coach to push them harder? When's the last, if you're a coach watching, when's the last time you had a kid pull you aside and say, hey, I need you to push me a little more today. I really want to suffer today. I want to work today. That's pretty rare for like a 7-year-old to say that to a coach. Um, what else? The competitiveness. That's something Moratoglu talked about. Who I totally agree with that. You're looking for, in the mindset department, a kid who's hard worker, but also a kid who's fiery, warrior type attitude, soldier, willing to just compete till the very end, fight for every point like it's life or death, and never give up, never quit, never tank. So you're looking for some of these character um, character aspects, of in terms of mindset, sports psychology, character, um, hard work, competitiveness. Another important one that a lot of people don't talk about is calm under pressure, being able to being clutch, basically. The best, the best players in the world, the most talented kids. Like there are kids may have physical gifts that I mentioned, but when they crumble under pressure, and the kids who are really talented in this department, this category, when it's like an important point, they always come up with the goods. The pressure just they have like an invincibility to pressure situations, and many kids, like when they're in pressure situation, they crumble. They have doubts. They're not able to execute. They have their something gets in the way. Their mind or their body doesn't perform the way they expect. And in my experience with really elite kids, real talent, this is a big talent to be able to be clutch when things are tight, when the chips are down, when the stakes are high, when the cameras are on and the lights are shining down on you. You're able to be clutch and perform when other people uh, falter. I remember I coached this little, very talented boy, Kyle Moutner, who could have been a great pro, I think. This many years ago. He ended up being a great Division I college player. He was a four-time All Ivy player, number one at UPenn for 4 years in the Ivy League. Great player, Kyle Moutner. I coached him for a long time, from 8 or 9 years old. And I remember when I went to Kyle's tournaments, he was always clutch. Like he had, even when he was young, like when it was, I knew it was like 1540. If he was down game point, he always came up with good tennis. Like it was uncanny. And those are the kind of that's a big psychological attribute that you're looking for. You're looking for, uh, I don't think a lot of people, maybe they don't put that category up there as something that's important for talent ID, but that certainly is. Does this player come up with the goods under pressure, or do they tend to falter, have doubts, or things like that? So I would put that very high in terms of the categories for identifying talent. In terms of character, along the lines of character and mental strengths. Now, another one I would submit to you guys is the ability to learn. And in this category, Tony Nadal talks about this a lot. He believes this. He says he's a great philosopher. He says this is the greatest talent, the ability to learn. As I think back of all the young prodigies that I've coached, top national ranked juniors, kids who went on to play elite Division I tennis, kids who are probably going to play on the pro tour. They all were coachable. That's such an important talent that maybe people don't really put up there along with like power and speed, but your ability to learn, to listen, to absorb information, to not be asked 100 times to do something. Steve Smith, the legendary American coach, the legend, great coach, talks about this a lot, how you shouldn't have to ask someone over and over again to do something. Like, ask one time, the one time rule. Uh, kids who are coachable get better faster. Kids who learn better get better faster. And so I think the ability to learn is an undiscovered uh, category. It's like a relatively unknown category of talent. And kids who listen well, absorb the information, and then integrate it quickly into their games, they get better quicker than kids who don't pay attention well, forget. You have to tell them over and over again the same thing, which wastes time. Um, I think of many top kids that I work with that some of them were difficult personalities, but that's always a roadblock. The best ones are the ones that are just coachable. They listen well and they get better faster. Vlada's like that. Kyle Mountain was like that. Um, I can go on and on down the list of players that I think of. And the ones that that where the relationship is easier as a coach with the player is always when a kid is willing, is really wants to listen and learn quickly. The ones you have to battle with, that's our job as a coach, to try to help a kid learn faster. And I work with many difficult kids, difficult personalities, and I don't mind that. That's what I get. That's my job. I get paid to do that. I get paid to help a kid learn faster. But it's definitely a battle, like that battle. The sooner you can get past that battle, the better it is for the player. And if a player has that more genetically, they're willing to listen and learn. That's a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful talent. It's a wonderful gift if you're blessed with that. You don't have to work at that. I should probably add that a lot of these talents, they're not all genetically in um, provided. Some of these things you can work on. Some of these things you can't fix. You can't fix your eyes, or you can improve your vision to some extent. A lot of these things you can improve on, but you know, some of them are more genetically based, and some of them are things that you can control to some extent. So there's definitely areas you can work on. Probably all the areas you can improve to some extent, but I'm just talking about like lights out. What are the gifts you need to be, best in the world? Another one, and this is kind of an odd category. I have a number of categories here, and I didn't even plan this talk out. I'm just sort of doing some verbal jazz here, like just impromptu thoughts about talent. Um, what's another one? The other one is, sounds crazy, but not to be too smart is one. Not to be overly intelligent, like too scholarly, where you want to go to school too much, because that gets in the way of being a great athlete. I really believe that you may seem that's odd, but to me, I don't feel you need a very high intelligence to play tennis. You certainly don't need a 200 IQ, 150 IQ even, or even 130 IQ. You don't need to be in Mensa. You just need a good intelligence. You don't need to be too curious, too analytical, too thoughtful. Um, a good mind helps, but too high a level of intelligence, I feel, gets in the way of decision making, gets in the way sometimes of the learning, gets in the way of actual training. Where if you have a lot of academic goals, I think that can really take away from being one of the best in the world as a tennis player. You can still be a great college player. You can be a college, like a scholar athlete. You can definitely be a scholar athlete. I would consider myself a scholar athlete. I'm very academic, and uh, I'm going back to school for a PhD. I love learning and scholarship and research and science and things like that now. And I'm also an athlete. But maybe that's why I never made it to the top of the pro tour. I think it's easier. That makes for a good coach. A lot of coaches are analytical and smart, and they bring that to their coaching. As a player, I think it's better just to be a little dumber, and that way, and it works out really great, because then you don't have to worry about school too much. You just basically, like, you're locked in to being an athlete. That's going to be your life. Um, re- Before you guys pillarize me about that one, maybe there's an exception where you can have a very high IQ and be very, very intellectual and still be a top pro in the world. There's probably some exceptions to that. But in general, I'm saying if you're really, really smart, it kind of gets in the way of your athlete laser focus on being an athlete. You want that athletic tunnel vision. You don't want to have to worry about your homework or doing studies and things like that. It's easier just to be an athlete and just do your sports stuff and just be sporty. Although you guys, I think this would be a great show, because all of you guys I probably, since I'm doing this impromptu extemporaneously, I probably missed a few categories, and you can also critique my categories and let me know if you agree or disagree. That'll make for a good comments. Drop a comment, let me know, or shoot me an email. But I think I essentially, you see what I'm covering. There's like the physical gifts, there's character, there's mental and emotional qualities. Emotional control is a good one. Some kids are just they can't control their emotions. They're not calm under fire. It's like it reminds me of like a soldier who, when people start shooting, they lose their cool and they get shot. You definitely want someone who's got ice water in the veins, so to speak, as the metaphor goes, who's calm under pressure, who doesn't get distracted easily. Concentration's another one. There's a lot of interesting subcategories in like mental and emotional, um, being able to control your anger, being able to control your frustrations, having a positive attitude is another really good one, like within the realm of sports psychology and mental toughness. Um, in general, I think the kids who are positive outlook, optimistic, those kids have a better chance of succeeding than kids who are really negative and pessimistic and cynical. So I think that's another talent. All of these talents, physical, mental, emotional, character driven talents, um, some that are more genetic based, some that maybe you may be able to work on or to improve somewhat. What do you think about all these talents, guys? I try to give you a sense of when I'm looking at a kid with my neural net. And I think making a neural net, we're in the age of AI, making a neural net to identify talent would be a very interesting exercise. And I think a neural net could take all of these categories and probably dozens more that I haven't mentioned on this brief show and put them into, uh, those into data and maybe have the neural net learn on the characteristics of many world-class players. And it would be really fascinating if the AI could do a better job of identifying talent as humans, because I believe, and I have to review the literature, but I believe the sport science will show that I believe the sport science is very pessimistic about the ability of like coaches in the field to identify talent and make predictions. Like me and Rick are saying this kid Vlada is going to be a superstar, and a lot of sport scientists will say, that's not possible to predict that. You can't do that accurately. There's this Instagram scientist that I see all the time, who's giving a lecture. I think he's from Australia, talking about how there's no way that parents can know, or you can tell if a child's uh, gifted or not. I don't. I guess what I'm saying, I don't really agree with that. Um, so I think there's definitely a way that we can judge talent based on a broad survey of all these categories that I mentioned, probably some other categories too. It would be very interesting to make a neural net, some type of engine that could take in all of these data points and then try to spit out like an algorithm that could try to spit out. But a neural net would be really cool, that keeps learning off of new players and new data, uh, and that continually improves itself to get a better talent identification. That would be a very, very cool, very interesting use of technology. So I guess maybe I don't agree with the classical scientific literature that says that it's impossible to identify talent, very difficult, especially hard to identify talent pre-puberty. I think there are signs that you can see if you're very experienced, and I'm sure Rick Macci would also agree with me because he spends a lot of time with the most elite players, junior players in the world, and he's made a lot of good predictions and also some predictions that were off as well. That's also the case. So, guys, what do you think about these talents that I mentioned? Uh, do you see that the way I see it, that it's much more complex than just saying, oh, that one's very tall, or oh, that one is very fast, or that kid is like a really hard worker. Uh, in my experience, when parents come to me and they tell me that their kid is talented, when they say that, or when a coach says this player is very talented, I'm always curious, what are their categories that they're using? And usually it's one of the ones I mentioned. Right? They judge just in a few different categories. Like maybe they have a kid who is like very fast. They say, my child is a very good athlete, very talented, moves very well. But as I'm suggesting, I think it's dozens of categories. And the only time you get a player who has a chance to be like a number one in the world, like literally one of the best players in the world, like Rick's predicted Vlada will be number one in the world. The only time you have the remotest chance of getting to that high a level in the world, remember you're competing against every other talented athlete out there, is if you just hit the 10 out of 10 on pretty much every single category straight down the line. So it's like jackpot. It's like the like jackpot in the casino, like ding 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 ding, like 10 out of 10 all the way down every category. And then you'll see some kids who are definitely talented, and they hit like ding ding ding, not that one, ding, not that one, not that one, ding ding. So they have a lot of talents. They have many gifts, but they don't have, all of them. They didn't like max out every category, and so they're still going to be amazing players. They could even be a pro. But what I'm saying is be like a Djokovic or an Alcaraz or Schwatek, or Coco. I think those players, they hit the 10 almost all the categories, and then they have a chance, if they don't get injured, to be literally number one in the world, like the best athlete in tennis in the world. And then there's everybody else. So that's my take on it. What do you guys think? Am I crazy? Am I way off? That's not necessarily scientific point of view. It would be interesting to do a show on talent ID based on the science and literature. This is just my perspective as a coach in the trenches working with juniors all the time. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much. God bless.